The courtroom was colder than I expected, not because of the temperature, but because of the way the silence clung to the wooden walls and pressed down on me like an invisible weight. I sat there at the long wooden table, my palms sweating, my pen trembling slightly as I held it over the divorce documents. My husband, or soon-to-be ex-husband, sat across from me, with that smug smile plastered across his face, as though this was the highlight of his week. He leaned back in his chair, dressed in his sleek grey suit, perfectly styled hair, a little smirk tugging at his lips as though this whole proceeding was a comedy, show just for him. He tapped his pen against the paper, grinning, and when he signed his name, he exaggerated the motion, almost laughing under his breath. Then he pointed at me, mocking me in front of the judge, in front of the lawyers, in front of anyone who cared to watch. His laughter wasn't loud, but it was sharp, cutting into me deeper than any knife. For years I had endured his belittling, his sarcasm, his constant reminders that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't belong by his side, that I was lucky he even chose me. And now, here he was, finalizing the divorce by making a show out of my pain, mocking me as if I were a joke, as if my heart, my tears, my sacrifices were nothing more than entertainment to him. I wanted to cry. I wanted to shout. I wanted to rip the papers in half and scream that he didn't deserve to laugh at me. Not after everything I had endured, not after the years I had given him. But instead I bowed my head, clenched my jaw, and forced myself to stay composed. The judge sat above us, stoic and quiet, shuffling papers, his eyes scanning documents I hadn't even read yet. There was a heaviness in the air, as though something more was about to unfold. But in that moment all I felt was humiliation. I remembered the first time I met him. He was charming, funny, confident. He made me feel seen in a way no one else had. But that didn't last. Once he had me, once I said I do, the man I thought I loved slipped away, replaced by someone who thrived on control, someone who thought tearing me down was the best way to keep himself on top. He mocked the way I dressed, the way I spoke, even the way I wore my hair. He told me I'd never amount to anything on my own, and for too long, I believed him. That's why this moment, this divorce, should have been freeing. It should have been the final step toward reclaiming my life. But with him laughing, mocking, or pointing at me as though I were beneath him, it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like defeat. I held my pen tighter, my knuckles white, and tried to push past the sting of his laughter. I looked down at the papers, at the legal jargon that spelled the end of our marriage. And for a moment I hesitated. Was I really ready to end it all here? Was I ready to close the chapter and walk away? My heart said yes. My soul said yes, but my pride wavered under his mockery, because I knew that deep down he wanted me to feel crushed. He wanted me to feel small, and I refused to give him that satisfaction. So I steadied my hand, breathed deeply, and began to sign my name, slowly, deliberately, without looking at him. But I could feel his eyes on me, that smug grin never leaving his face, as though he thought he had won. The judge finally spoke, his deep voice breaking the silence. "We'll move on to the next matter," he said, lifting a different set of papers from his stack. His eyes scanned the words carefully, his brow furrowing slightly, as though something had caught his attention. He looked at me, then back at the papers, then at my ex-husband. The atmosphere shifted, though my ex barely noticed, too busy leaning back in his chair, whispering something under his breath that made him chuckle again. The judge cleared his throat, and suddenly the room grew even quieter, as though everyone sensed the weight of what was about to be said. But before we get there, let me tell you how we got to this exact moment, because this wasn't just about a failed marriage or a mocking husband. This was about everything that had led up to today, and more importantly, everything that was about to change when those papers were read aloud. I grew up in a modest home, raised by my father, a man of quiet strength and boundless wisdom. He was my anchor, my teacher, my protector. He always told me never to let anyone make me feel less than I was. "You are more than enough," he would say. Never forget that, but I did forget. Or maybe I just stopped believing it after years of my husband's words tearing me down. My father passed away a few years ago, and with his death, I felt like I lost the only person who truly believed in me. What I didn't know was that my father had left something behind, something I would only discover in this very courtroom at this very moment. My ex-husband, of course, knew none of this. To him, this was the end of the line, the final blow in his twisted little game of superiority. He thought he had stripped me of everything, my pride, my dignity, my worth. He thought he had won. But life has a funny way of turning the tables when you least expect it. And as the judge prepared to read the will my father had left, a will I didn't even know existed, I felt the faintest spark of hope flicker inside me, even though I had no idea what was coming. Still, as I sat there, pen in hand, my husband's mocking laughter ringing in my ears, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to shift, something that would change the way I saw myself, the way I saw him, the way I saw everything. And little did I know, the power dynamic in that room was about to flip in the most unexpected way possible. The judge looked up again, his voice calm but commanding. Before we finalize these proceedings, there's another matter that must be addressed. The will of your late father. My heart stopped. My father's will? What will? I had never been told about any will, never heard of any documents, never imagined he left anything behind for me. Confusion washed over me, and I looked from the judge to my ex-husband, who was suddenly leaning forward, his smirk faltering just a little, curiosity flickering across his face. The judge continued unfolding the papers, preparing to read aloud words that would change everything. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt a strange mix of fear and anticipation, because whatever was written in those pages wasn't just about inheritance. It wasn't just about money or property. It was about truth, about legacy, about justice. And I could feel it in my bones. My father had left something behind for me, something that would silence the mocking laughter across the table, something that would remind me of who I was and who I was always meant to be. And as the judge cleared his throat and began to read, I knew this was only the beginning. The room seemed to hold its breath as the judge adjusted his glasses, holding my father's will in his hands like it was a sacred text. My ex-husband leaned forward, curiosity and greed mingling in his eyes, because for him, anything involving money, property, or power was worth paying attention to. I sat there frozen, my heart pounding so loud I thought the whole courtroom could hear it. I didn't even know my father had a will. He never mentioned it, never left any hint. But as the judge began to read, I realized this was no ordinary document. "This is the last will and testament of Richard Morgan," the judge began, his voice steady and commanding. "I leave behind not only material possessions, but words of truth and wisdom for my daughter. Maya," my breath caught in my throat. "He wrote it for me." My ex-husband glanced at me, his smirk returning as if to say, "Let's see what scraps he left you." But as the judge continued, that smirk began to waver. "My daughter has endured much in her life, and though I am not here to shield her, I leave behind what I hope will give her strength. To Maya I leave my entire estate, my house, my savings, my land, and my company shares, not because of wealth, but because I believe she will know how to honor what I built." Gasps filled the courtroom. My eyes widened, my hands trembling. My father had left everything to me, everything. The man across from me, the one who had mocked me, laughed at me, tried to make me feel like nothing, suddenly sat straighter, his smile faltering into disbelief. "What?" he muttered under his breath. "That can't be right," the judge went on. "Furthermore, to my daughter I leave these words. Never forget your worth. The world may try to convince you that you are less, but you are more than enough. Do not let anyone's laughter drown out your strength. This inheritance is not a gift, it is recognition of the woman you already are." Tears blurred my vision. My father's voice echoed through the judge's words, piercing through the fog of pain and doubt I had been living in for years. My ex-husband, on the other hand, leaned back in his chair, running his hand over his face in frustration. His little game was unraveling, his mockery silenced by the truth written in black ink. But the will didn't stop there. "To the man she once called her husband," the judge continued, his eyes narrowing slightly as he read, "I leave nothing, for he has already taken too much from her spirit. But I also leave him a reminder. Mocking others is the act of the weak. True strength is lifting up those you claim to love. The courtroom went dead silent. My ex's face turned red. His jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might break. The words hit him like a slap, delivered by the man who wasn't even alive anymore, but still had the power to strip him bare in front of everyone. He tried to laugh it off, muttering something under his breath. But there was no laughter this time. No mocking, only silence. I sat there, overwhelmed, tears rolling down my cheeks. For the first time in so long, I felt seen. I felt vindicated. My father's will wasn't just about the inheritance. It was about restoring my dignity, giving me back the voice I had lost in years of belittlement. My ex slammed his pen on the table. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, his mask of confidence finally cracking. "She doesn't deserve any of this. She couldn't even keep a marriage together." His words echoed through the room, but they sounded hollow, desperate. The judge raised a hand calmly. "Order, this is a court of law, not a stage for your tantrums." My ex glared at me, his face twisted with anger. "You think this changes anything? You think you're better than me now because of some stupid will?" His voice dripped with venom, but for once I wasn't afraid. I straightened in my chair, lifted my chin, and met his gaze with a steadiness that surprised even me. "No," I said softly but firmly. "I've always been better than the way you treated me. This just proves it." The room was silent again, all eyes on me, and for the first time in years, I felt powerful. Not because of money, not because of property, but because I finally believed in myself. My father's words had reminded me of who I was, and no amount of mocking could take that away. The judge finished reading the will, placing the papers neatly back on the bench. "This matter is closed," he declared. "The divorce is finalized, and the inheritance stands as written." With a sharp rap of his gavel, the proceeding was officially over. My ex stormed out of the courtroom, his footsteps echoing like thunder, but I didn't flinch. I stayed seated, clutching the memory of my father's words like a shield around my heart. People came up to me afterward, some offering congratulations, others just looking at me with a kind of newfound respect. But none of it mattered as much as the quiet strength that settled in my chest. For so long, I had let someone else's mockery define me. But now I was free, free to honor my father's legacy, free to live on my terms, free to rise. As I walked out of the courtroom into the sunlight, I felt lighter than I had in years. My father was gone, but his love remained, woven into every word of that will, every reminder that I was more than enough. And though my ex's laughter had once been the loudest sound in my world, it was now nothing more than an echo, drowned out by the truth I carried within me. I smiled, not out of spite, but out of peace. The mocking was over. The story was mine now. And to anyone listening to my story right now, I want you to remember this. Never let anyone's laughter or mockery convince you that you are less. You are stronger than you think, braver than you know, and more deserving than the world might tell you. If this story touched you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own strength, then don't leave without subscribing. Join this community, because here we rise together, we lift each other up, and we never let anyone make us feel small again. Subscribe, stay inspired, and remember, you are enough.